I've had a few people call, "Oh, Pastor, you can't preach Sunday."
A pastor in Alabama delivers a sermon days after he says his grandson, Brandon Kendrick, murdered his wife, 2 children, and a niece and nephew. I have 7 details about what Brandon Kendrick's grandfather says happened and what may have led him to do the unthinkable. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Brandon Kendrick faces 5 counts of capital murder for the death of his wife, Kelse, their son, Kaleb, their daughter, Kynli, and the children's cousins, Colton and Haley Daniels. The crime is absolutely unimaginable. Last Thursday was like any other summer night, with some exceptions, of course. Family members of Kelse Kendrick told the Daily Mail that she was trying to be a supportive wife to Brandon Kendrick because of his mental health issues. Kelse's Facebook page shows a number of posts that would lead you to believe she was not happy for many months. She shared a video in April that said, "No one talks about the guilt you feel when you finally decide to leave someone you really love because they constantly hurt you and don't want to change." Kelse also shared a TikTok video that started with, quote, "A man playing the victim in his life will say these things to his wife." It's really sad because there are other posts that show that the couple was once very happy. In September of 2022, Kelse wrote, "Happy anniversary to my person. 6 years ago, I fell for you, and 4 years ago today, we said forever and ever. Throughout everything, we have stuck together side by side, and 6 hard years and 2 beautiful babies later, here we are with forever and ever to go. I love you so much." Last Thursday night, Kelse, her children, and their cousins had planned to stay with family somewhere else for the night. But family members told the Daily Mail that Brandon Kendrick wanted Kelse to come home. So she did, bringing the children with her. Brandon Kendrick's grandfather, Allan Kendrick, is the pastor at Oasis Church. He described in a sermon on Sunday seeing Brandon right before the shooting.
I will say this. 10 minutes before I heard a gunshot, my grandson was sitting in my bedroom with me and Gay, laughing, talking. Talked about the first time we ever took him to a restaurant for his 13th birthday. He had never been in a restaurant. We took him there for his birthday.
Pastor Kendrick went on to talk about the terrible childhood Brandon had had and the abuse he had suffered.
All he'd ever known for 12 years was abuse. Physical, sexual, mental, drug. When I got him at 12 years old, he weighed 58 pounds. He was on 9 different psychotic medicines. At 18, the system failed him. Took him off of disability. Took him off medication because we couldn't afford to buy it. Because they canceled his Medicaid. Gay and I watched him all these years try so hard.
Now, you heard Kendrick say that he was talking with Brandon 10 minutes before he heard a gunshot. He revealed other disturbing information. Pastor Kendrick claims that earlier that morning, Brandon actually called 911 asking for help for his mental health issues. He reportedly suffered from schizophrenia.
1 o'clock on Thursday morning, he's calling 911, asking for help, only to be turned down. In the bedroom with me and Gay, we're talking about the J. Alexander dinner we took him to. A few other things, we'd laughing, talking. His wife had gotten home. She came in, laughed with us a little while, left. He got up 10 minutes later, pow! I told Gay, I said, "That's a gunshot."
Pastor Kendrick then described Brandon Kendrick walking into his home with a gun.
I didn't have my shoes on, so I'm putting my shoes on. Here he walked in our bedroom with a gun in his hand. She was closest to him. She grabbed the gun. It went off. I don't know how it kept from hitting her. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I know. because our prayer team.
According to published reports, Pastor Kendrick then called 911. What the deputies found when they arrived was beyond the pale. 5 people shot in the head. Brandon Kendrick's wife, Kelse, their 2 children, Kaleb and Kynli, and the cousins of the children, Colton and Haley Daniels. Haley died later at the hospital. Brandon and Kelse had been living in an apartment above the garage on Pastor Kendrick's property. A family member claimed that the door appeared to have been knocked off its hinges and one of the children was shot while trying to run away. Colton and Haley were not even supposed to be there, but family members told the Daily Mail that their mother was scheduled for surgery the next morning, so Kelse was watching them. Family members of Kelse, Kaleb, Kynli, Colton, and Haley are reeling. They are now planning 5 funerals, and they're trying to figure out how to pay for them. They've set up a GoFundMe page hoping to raise enough money to pay for those funerals. Meanwhile, Brandon Kendrick has pleaded not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. One family member told a local TV station that plea was shocking to her, given what she knows about the family. I want to take a moment to tell you about this awesome app that I've tried. It's called Upside, and it's great because it will give you cash back on things that you buy all of the time, like food and gas. Upside gives you real money back that goes straight into your bank account. When I pump gas or order takeout, I always check Upside for the best deals. Why not get cash back when I'm making a purchase? Download Upside, check out the offers, and when you find one, claim it, and then pay with your debit or credit card. I got more than $5 back on a tank of gas and $3 back on pizza. You can't beat that. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the promo code CRIMEFIX to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Dr. Katherine Ramsland is a professor of forensic psychology at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. Dr. Ramsland, please tell me your first thoughts on Brandon Kendrick shooting 5 members of his family, including his wife and 2 children, and the fact that his family is saying he was declining mentally in the weeks before this shooting.
Well, apparently he's been declining for a while, but my first thoughts were this is a father killing a family, and we do have a lot of information about fathers who kill. Often they see their family as an extension of themselves. But I did wonder about not just the potential mental illness factor, but any other stressors in his life. And it seemed that he had lost his government aid for getting the medication that he needed. So he was not taking medication. He had lost his job. So then financial pressures were beginning to set in. And according to some social media, his wife was considering either separating from him or leaving him. And she had found him to be abusive, narcissistic, demanding. And so that's a lot of stressors on somebody who's also suffering from not really having mental resources. So I think when you see a lot of that coming together, but we don't know, maybe that he did not plan this, but they got into an argument. Clearly, he didn't plan to kill the other two children who were relatives who were brought back by his wife to stay with her because their mother was going to have a surgical procedure. So whether it was planned or not is not clear. Certainly he was armed, but it does look as if he was reacting to something.
Colton and Haley are the niece and nephew who were killed. It's just absolutely awful. There are a few things, though, that you mentioned that are really, really interesting to me. The fact that, they weren't even going to stay there that night from the reporting on this story. He asked specifically for Kelse to come home, and she did. So she brought, of course, all of the children because she was going to be watching not only her own children, caring for her children, but watching Colton and Haley as well. So he did ask them to come home. But what's interesting, too, to me is the fact that his grandfather, Pastor Allan Kendrick, gave a sermon in church on Sunday and said that 10 minutes before he heard the first gunshot, Brandon had been in his house and they were talking about old times and about, the dinners they would go out to in restaurants, and everything seemed fine. And then he hears a pop 10 minutes later. I mean, how can things go so wrong in a 10-minute period of time where you're talking to your grandmother and grandfather in their house And within 10 minutes, you've killed 5 people.
So that's why I think he was reacting to something. Either he's reacting to something or he had relaxed with the knowledge of what he was going to do. But my sense was that there had been a plan in place where his wife was going to stay away, take care of the cousins. Their 2 children were with her. And he was not asking her to come back, begging her. He kept calling and kept harassing her about coming back. And so that suggests some issues with his own sense of control over the situation. When she did come back, that was a period of time when he seemed to be relaxed, but then went out and shot all of them. And that's why I think a possibility was they were arguing about it. She might have been very angry at him for bringing her back when the plan had been set for her to stay away, to watch the other children, to help out the other family. And she probably was angry because we can see from her media posts that she's already annoyed at him for the kinds of things he's been saying to her, the attitudes he's been adopting, the fact that she now has the financial burden, but she can't herself carry it, take care of him, take care of her kids, and try to pay the bills. So I think it's possible they had an argument that things had reached a point where both were under stress and that he picked up a gun and then shot everybody who was there.
Pastor Kendrick also said that Brandon called 911 at 1:00 that morning. So, 12 or more hours before this unfolded, asking for help, and that he didn't get any help for his, mental illness. I mean, so he obviously had, if that indeed happened, he knew that he wasn't all right. He knew that he was in a bad place.
Well, you can't, each state has its own laws about this, but somebody is not going to be taken in for observation if they're not in imminent danger to self or others. If he did not express that he really thought he was going to harm somebody or harm himself, then there's really nothing a 911 dispatcher can do about it. They can't just take him in against his will. It's very hard to evaluate somebody over the phone. It's not clear how many other times he might have called since he had been off his medication. It's not clear what he actually said on the call. So it's hard to address that. And I also don't really know the laws of that state regarding that. Sure. But I do know it's very difficult to get people who are even in crisis into a place for observation. It is very difficult.
His grandfather said he took custody of him when he was 12 years old and that he had been the victim of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Probably not uncommon things for people, sadly, who suffer from mental illness. I mean, his parents could have had severe mental illness as well. Just a really sad case, though. If that's indeed the fact, he's raised by his grandfather, who's a pastor, victim of abuse, suffering from schizophrenia, in decline for some time, and then this happens. So do you see that as a common thread, that abuse coupled with mental illness leads to people who commit crimes to commit crimes?
Well, I think it's hard to generalize, but in his situation, apparently he was diagnosed with early onset schizophrenia when he was just 9 years old. When he's got an unsupportive family, he's subjected to abuse, having to be rescued by a grandfather. And I believe they were living in a garage apartment. So that's also difficult because he's failing in so many ways. And I'm sure it was very difficult for him to admit to that. We do see periods of time where he had a good marriage. His wife was happy. She's celebrating with him. She's celebrating him as her husband. So we know that there were times when he could get it together, when he could hold a job, but having that background from childhood on top of early onset schizophrenia, on top of not being able to get the resources he needed, or even if he did, maybe not taking the medication that he was supposed to take, on top of financial difficulties, we have a lot of events converging in this particular case that that you would expect violence to come out of it. If he's armed, and that's a question too, how in the world did he get to have a gun? But if he's armed and he's desperate and he's feeling the pressure and he just can't take it anymore, you have the ingredients for violence.
It's just a really terribly sad case. And he's pleading not guilty by reason of mental illness and mental defect. Is it possible that people who are insane, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but is it possible that people are insane just for a few minutes while they're committing an act and then they go back to being sane? Is that a possibility?
Well, and we do know that he even said to his grandfather, "What did I do? And he seemed confused. Yeah, we do. We certainly have moments of lucidity with mental illnesses, even extreme mental illnesses, where they can seem fine, and then they have a psychotic episode. There's all kinds of legal precedent for that. I think it's the right thing for him to do, to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, because he does have a history of diagnoses and medication and the lack of medication and what he does when he doesn't have access to it. I think his grandfather actually made the statement that the system failed him, and that's possible. If he was no longer able to get the kinds of aid that he needed in order to buy the medication he needed, then yeah, that's a failure on the part of the system.
Dr. Ramsland, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.